Let's talk about stereotypes. What are stereotypes? The Oxford Languages Dictionary defines a stereotype as a widely held but fixed and oversimplified image or idea of a particular type of person or thing. A history of racial stereotypes in America ties this definition to Black women in academia today. This video will discuss the history of these stereotypes, their presence in media, and their current effects on Black women in academic spaces. The Jezebel stereotype depicts Black women as inherently hypersexual. It was created during the time of slavery by white slave owners to justify their sexual assault of Black women. Mammy, Jezebel, Sapphire, and their homegirls, developing an oppositional gaze toward the images of Black women by Carolyn M. West, explains that the Jezebel stereotype erases the experiences of Black enslaved women, who were stripped of their clothing and had their value reduced to their ability to reproduce. The Sapphire stereotype portrays Black women as inherently aggressive. It was popularized by a 1950s radio show called Amos and Andy, and is now seen in modern media under a new name, the Angry Black Woman. Carolyn M. West also points out that the Sapphire stereotype masculinizes enslaved Black women for their anger, which was a manifestation of their pain endured after their husbands and children were sold into slavery. Both stereotypes were perpetuated in past media through political cartoons, and permeate modern media through television, films, music videos, and other forms of media. Now that we've defined these stereotypes, the question is, why do we care? Speaking from experience, Black women are multifaceted by nature. Our emotional complexity, individual expression, and unique interests all make up our humanity, allowing us to connect with each other and those outside our community. The Jezebel and Sapphire stereotypes reduce Black women to two traits: hypersexuality and aggression, effectively stripping us of our complexity and individuality, the things that make us human. As I mentioned before, these stereotypes have been perpetuated by the media throughout history. Those with no other interactions or experiences with Black women outside of the media have come to associate these oversimplified images with every Black woman. For generations, people have considered it a norm to have a warped perception of Black women, to group all Black women together to see us as a collective and not as individuals. In this way, these stereotypes stifle genuine connections between people. These stereotypes encourage people to expect certain behaviors from all Black women and to justify their harmful treatment of Black women in certain situations. This brings us to today's topic of discussion: the impact of the Jezebel and Sapphire stereotypes on Black women in academia. As I said before, these stereotypes influence the expectations and treatment of Black women. Specifically, the Jezebel and Sapphire stereotypes cause Black women in academic spaces to have difficulty advancing in their careers, finding mentorship, and expressing their emotions. The article From Mammy to Superwoman: Images That Hinder Black Women's Career Development by Wendy Reynolds Dobbs and others discusses how the media's portrayal of Black women as Jezebels has popularized the misconception that Black women faculty use their sexual deviance as a manipulation tactic for promotions. As a result, the skill set and authority of Black women faculty are often questioned by students and colleagues in higher education. To avoid this misconception, Black women faculty tend to isolate themselves from their white male colleagues, a large population of leaders in predominantly white institutions. This makes it difficult for Black women faculty to find mentorship in academic spaces. Career ascension of African American women in executive positions in post-secondary institutions, an article by Erica Gamble and Norma Turner, discusses how this lack of mentorship makes it difficult for Black women in academic settings to obtain tenure. Research highlights the Jezebel stereotype's damaging effects on the future careers of Black women in academia. A study conducted by Jessica M. Salerno and other researchers revealed that when Black women show anger in group settings, it decreases their credibility and influence. The attribution of Black women's emotional responses to their character rather than the situation demonstrates the real-life effects of the Sapphire stereotype's historical portrayal of Black women as inherently aggressive. To avoid the judgment of their peers, Black women tend to avoid expressing vulnerability in academic spaces. The Reynolds Dobbs article illustrates this, mentioning the tendency for Black women to become soft-spoken or silent in academic spaces. The Gamble and Turner article identifies the harmful effects of this on the performance of Black women faculty, stating that Black women often play it safe when conflicts arise on the job to avoid being stereotyped. While my research on this topic is still limited and I have more to learn, there seems to be a gap in terms of research about the impact of the Jezebel and Sapphire stereotypes on Black women undergraduates in institutions of higher education. However, I know from personal experience that these stereotypes create issues across the spectrum of academia. As a Black woman who has attended predominantly white institutions from kindergarten to now, in my sophomore year of college, I have felt a constant pressure to dress appropriately to maintain the respect of my peers and teachers. Though I am now a firm advocate for expressing oneself authentically to combat respectability politics, growing up, I used to avoid gold hoops, acrylic nails, and certain outfits to avoid being perceived as overly sexual and unintelligent in academic spaces. I grew up fighting the Jezebel stereotype before I was aware of its existence. I have been subjected to microaggressions and racist comments from students and faculty, and every time I have felt pressure to remain calm. I have felt pressure to maintain an air of professionalism while explaining the damaging effects of their comments, whilst experiencing those same harmful effects to my mental and emotional well-being. I would stifle my anger and pain before they had the chance to do it for me, before they had the chance to write me off as the angry Black woman, invalidating my feelings and discrediting my intelligence and capabilities. My experiences are not unique. I told a friend of mine about this research project, and she shared with me that as a Black female college undergraduate, she is sometimes labeled as controlling when taking initiative on randomly assigned group projects. As her friend, I know that leadership comes naturally to her, but sometimes her peers feel threatened by this and act passive-aggressive towards her instead of taking time to understand where she's coming from. I have seen countless news stories of Black girls being suspended from school and Black women fired from their jobs for wearing their curls, braids, or locks. Their natural hair is seen as militant and disruptive in academic spaces. The impact of these stereotypes can have drastic effects. It can put Black girls in danger. This brings to mind the news story of Kaya Roll, who was arrested at 6 years old, placed in zip ties, and put in the back of a police car for throwing a tantrum and kicking a staff member at school. Stereotypes can prevent a grown man from seeing the humanity in a little girl, disregarding her childhood innocence in favor of perceiving her as aggressive and needing to be controlled. The stories of Black women in academic spaces are stories that matter and stories that demand change. Black women should be allowed to express their emotions without being perceived as the angry Black woman, having their feelings invalidated and their skill set questioned. Black women should not have to play into respectability politics to gain respect from the white majority. Black women should be allowed to wear their natural hair without fear of judgment, allowed to express themselves through their appearance and emotions without fear of being sexualized, discredited, or disrespected. Black women should be able to take up space in academic settings as their authentic selves, and students and faculty should be able to recognize their humanity and individuality, regardless of race. One of the steps we can take towards combating the Jezebel and Sapphire stereotypes is creating positive representations of Black women in media and in academic settings. The recent movie remake of The Little Mermaid couples Black women's femininity with naivety and vulnerability, combating the expectation of sexual deviance that the Jezebel stereotype places on Black women. The cartoon Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur depicts a Black girl interested in STEM, highlighting the intelligence of Black girls and Black women instead of painting them as irrationally angry and lacking depth like the Sapphire stereotype. Positive representation in modern media is a step toward change as it actively combats the historical limiting depictions of Black women. It's also important to create positive representation for Black women in academia by hiring more Black female teachers, professors, faculty, and administrators. Black women deserve to have leaders to look up to as they advance in their careers, people who understand their experiences and can recognize their humanity, people who don't reduce them to stereotypes. Positive representation in academia includes creating more inclusive curricula from kindergarten to college. From elementary school to high school, the only things I learned about Black history were slavery and the civil rights movement. It's only now that I'm in college and have had the opportunity to take courses centered around Black history that I've been introduced to historical figures like Katherine Johnson, Ella Baker, and Zora Neale Hurston, scholars, activists, and creatives, Black women who have made contributions and introduced new ways of thinking into our society. Black women and Black girls in academia deserve the opportunity to understand their identity outside of stereotypes, racism, and the systems that oppress us. We are beautiful, intelligent, talented, and capable, but these are messages that we didn't grow up receiving. Instead, we consumed media that degraded us. I think it's important for everyone to see my community in its entirety. A way to do this is to create positive representations of Black women in the media and in school curricula from elementary school onward to combat historical stereotypes. Thank you so much for watching. This was such an intriguing and personal research project for me, and I can't wait to learn more as I do more research. Bye!